There is a guy I know. He spent 7 full years grinding just to save his first $500,000. 7 years. He was living with roommates at 32. He drove a Honda Civic from 2006. Every single day, he packed his own lunch while his coworkers ordered delivery without a second thought. Then one morning, he opened his account and saw 6 figures staring back at him for the first time in his life. And here is what his very first thought was. Quote, "Only 9 more of these to go." He did the math right there in his head. 7 years multiplied by 9. 63 more years of this exact lifestyle. He would be 94 years old before he ever felt rich. He was so shaken by that number that he started looking at new apartments that same week, just to feel like something had changed. But here is the thing. His math was completely wrong. And that single mistake, that one misunderstanding about how money actually grows, is the exact reason most people who hit 6 figures never reach 7. They walk away right before the curve that changes everything kicks in. They are standing at the bottom of a roller coaster, staring up at the first hill and assuming the entire ride is going to feel that slow and painful. But wealth does not grow like climbing a hill. It grows like a snowball rolling down a mountain. And if you step away before gravity takes over, you miss the whole point entirely. So here's what this is about. The exact math behind why your first milestone feels brutal, but is actually the most critical. Why there is a specific number where everything flips, and why jumping from 1 million to 2 million happens faster than going from 0 to 100,000, which sounds completely impossible, but is simply how exponential math works. Stay with me, because this is the one thing rich people never explain out loud. Picture a snowball for a moment. You are standing at the top of a mountain. You grab a handful of snow and pack it together, maybe the size of a softball. You set it down and start rolling it forward. First rotation, it picks up almost nothing. The surface is tiny. You are doing all the pushing and the snowball is barely changing. Second rotation, same story. Still small, still frustrating. You glance down the mountain and think, at this rate, this is going to take forever. But you keep going anyway, because what else are you supposed to do? By rotation 10, something quietly starts to shift. The snowball is now about the size of a basketball. It has more surface area now. Each rotation is picking up a little more snow than the one before it. By rotation 20, it is beach ball sized, and you notice you are not pushing as hard anymore. Momentum is starting to carry it. By rotation 50, the thing is massive. It is pulling up entire sheets of snow with every single turn, and now you are just trying to keep pace with it. That is exactly what compound interest does to your money. The first 100 rotations feel completely pointless. The last 100 rotations create 90% of the total size. Your investment account works in the exact same way. The most painful part of this whole process is that nobody ever tells you which rotation you are actually on. You are out there pushing your softball-sized snowball, convinced you are still on rotation 3, when in reality, you might already be on rotation 47, right on the edge of the acceleration point. And that is where most people make their biggest mistake. They stop pushing. They cash out to buy a nicer car or move into a bigger place. And the snowball stops growing at the exact moment it was about to start rolling completely on its own. But what actually happens when you keep pushing through the pain? Let me give you the actual numbers, because this is where it starts to get uncomfortable. Say you are investing $500 every single month into a plain S&P 500 index fund. 7% annual returns. That is a conservative number based on inflation-adjusted historical data going all the way back to 1926. This is not some crypto fantasy or a stock-picking genius move. This is just automated deposits into something like VTI month after month. Year 1, you put in $6,000 total. With returns, your account ends the year at about $6,200. Your total returns for the entire year, $200. You gave up $500 a month. You said no to dinners, trips, and upgrades, and the market handed you $200 back. Meanwhile, your coworker bought a Peloton and seems perfectly fine. This is the exact moment where most people's confidence starts to crack. They are sitting there thinking, I am doing everything right, and I am barely moving at all. Year 5. You have put in $30,000 total. Your balance is sitting around $36,000. You have earned $6,000 from compound growth. That is better than nothing, sure. But you are still doing almost all of the heavy lifting yourself. The returns feel like a tip at a restaurant, not an actual salary. You are still on rotation 15 of the snowball. Year 10, 60,000 contributed. Account balance hits 87,000. You have earned 27,000 purely from returns. Now things are starting to move. But you are looking at that number and thinking, great, so I need to keep doing this for another 30 years? And that thought is exactly where people fall into the fatal trap. They assume that because it took 10 years to reach 100,000, the next 100,000 is going to take 10 years too. But what if I told you that assumption is completely backwards? Here is where people make the fatal mistake. They look at how long it took to hit their first 100,000, and they assume everything from that point forward works on a straight line. They think, it took me 10 years to get to 100,000. So 200,000 must be year 20, 300,000 must be year 30. And that kind of math makes them want to quit entirely, because nobody wants to spend 30 years just to hit 300,000. But that is not how this works at all. From 100,000 to 200,000 takes about 7 more years with the same $500 monthly contribution. From 200,000 to 300,000, 5 years. From 300,000 to 400,000, 4 years. The gap between each 100,000 milestone keeps shrinking. It keeps compressing because the snowball is getting bigger every single month. Your returns are now compounding on top of an increasingly larger base. There is an old story about a chess master and a king. The king tells the chess master he can have any reward he wants for winning a match. The chess master thinks for a moment and says, quote, I want 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains on the second square, 4 on the third, doubling each square. The king laughs out loud because it sounds so small. 1 grain, 2 grains, whatever. But his own advisors frantically try to stop him because they actually understand what exponential math does. By square 64, the king owes 18 quintillion grains of rice, more rice than has ever existed on Earth. That is the raw power of doubling. That is exactly what compound interest is quietly doing inside your account right now. The first few squares feel like absolutely nothing, but the last few squares are so absurd, they are almost hard to believe. So when does this actually start to feel real in your own life? The first major psychological shift happens when you hit $100,000. Here's exactly why that number matters so much. At 7% returns, a $100,000 portfolio generates about $7,000 per year in growth. That single number changes everything. $7,000 is more than you are putting in yourself each year at $500 a month. For the very first time in your entire investing journey, your money is working as hard as you are, actually harder, because that $7,000 shows up whether you're sleeping, on vacation, or watching Netflix on a Tuesday afternoon. Your own contributions still matter, but the returns are now carrying serious weight alongside you. This is rotation 50 on the snowball. You are no longer pushing it alone. But here is the trap that catches most people right at this exact moment. Some people hit 100,000 and immediately think, I made it. They ease off on contributions. They reward themselves. They treat it like a finish line when it is actually just the launch pad. Other people hit that same number and do the linear math wrong. They assume the next 100,000 is going to take just as long as the first one did, and they get so discouraged they back off entirely. Both groups end up doing the same thing. They quit right before things actually start getting interesting. And the people who stay, the ones who keep pushing past 100,000 without slowing down, they are about to hit something that changes the entire game. Because the next inflection point does not just grow your money. It changes your relationship with your job, your boss, and your entire life. And most people have never even heard of it. The second inflection point is $650,000. This is where compound interest stops being an interesting theory and becomes something that actually rearranges your life. At 8% returns, a $650,000 portfolio generates $52,000 every single year. At 7%, that is $45,500 annually. The median household income in the United States right now is about $70,000. That means your portfolio, just sitting there doing nothing, is generating 65 to 75% of what the average American household earns by working full-time. Your money is earning nearly what most people trade 40 hours a week for. I watched this happen to a friend of mine who runs a small accounting firm. He hit 600,000 across his taxable brokerage and retirement accounts combined around age 49. He did not quit his job, but his entire way of thinking about work changed overnight. His boss, the same person who had been making his life miserable for years, suddenly had no power over him at all. My friend could walk away the very next day, and his portfolio would cover most of his expenses while he figured out his next move. So he started saying no. No to working weekends, no to extra projects nobody asked for, no to the degrading comments that used to go unchallenged in meetings. And here is what happened next. His boss backed off completely. Because my friend had stopped acting like someone who desperately needed that job, the entire power dynamic between them flipped in an instant. That is what $650,000 actually buys you, not full financial independence, but the psychological freedom that comes from knowing you have a real exit. And this is also where something counterintuitive happens with market crashes, something that sounds completely insane until you see the math behind it. Here's where market crashes stop being terrifying and start becoming your biggest advantage. You have $650,000 and you are still putting in $500 a month. The market drops 20%. Your portfolio falls to $520,000. That is painful to watch on any given day. But here's what is actually happening underneath the surface. Your $500 monthly contributions are now buying shares at a 20% discount. Every single month during that crash, you are buying stocks on sale. And historically, this is not something that happens sometimes or usually. It is something that has happened always. Given enough time, the market recovers. The people who kept contributing through 2008, who kept buying right at the bottom while everyone around them was panicking, ended up with dramatically better returns than people who waited and started investing in 2010 after the recovery was already underway. Why? Because they were buying shares at Black Friday prices for 18 straight months while everyone else was too afraid to touch anything. There is an old parable about a farmer during a famine. Everyone around him is hoarding grain. Nobody wants to plant because they are terrified of losing their seed and ending up with absolutely nothing. But this farmer plants anyway. He thinks to himself, if the famine keeps going, I am done. But if it ends, I am going to have a massive harvest. The famine ends. Everyone else is scrambling to find seed. The farmer becomes wealthy. That is exactly what buying during a crash is. It is planting when everyone else is hoarding. And the people who understand this, the ones who actually keep investing when the world feels like it is falling apart, they are the ones who eventually hit the third inflection point. The one where the math stops being impressive and starts being almost impossible to believe. The third inflection point is $1 million. At 7%, a $1 million portfolio generates $70,000 every year. At 8%, that is $80,000. Your portfolio is now earning more than the median household income in this country, and it is doing it from doing absolutely nothing. But here is where the exponential curve goes completely vertical. From 0 to 1 million took about 29 years in this example. From 1 million to 1.5 million, 6 more years. Not 29, not 15, 6. You just added 50% to your entire net worth in 1/5 of the time it took you to build the first million. From 1.5 million to 2 million takes 5 more years. You just doubled your original million in 11 years total. From 2 million to 3 million, about 6 years. The same $1 million that took you 3 full decades to build the first time now takes only 6 years to add again. Each additional million after that happens progressively faster. Not because you are putting in more money each month, but because the base you are compounding from has become so enormous that even small percentage gains translate into massive dollar amounts. And here's the part that nobody talks about openly, the part that actually determines whether any of this ever works for you or not. It is not the math. The math is simple. It is your brain. Your brain evolved over millions of years to chase immediate rewards. See food, eat it, see danger, run from it. That instinct worked perfectly on the African savanna 50,000 years ago. It works terribly in modern investing, where the best possible move is often to do absolutely nothing for decades, while numbers slowly grow on a screen. But what happens when that instinct tells you to quit? Every single day you choose to put $500 into your account instead of upgrading your apartment or buying a nicer car, you are fighting your own brain. The apartment upgrade gives you something immediate. You walk into a space that feels better. You have friends over, and the place impresses them. That is a real, tangible reward your brain can feel right now. The 500 going into your brokerage gives you exactly 0 immediate satisfaction. The number goes up by 500. That is it. No dopamine, no social validation, nothing you can touch or show anyone. This is why our entire culture celebrates the wrong things. We celebrate the promotion and the raise, then immediately spend more to match the new lifestyle. We celebrate buying a house, then act shocked when 40% of take-home pay disappears into payments, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. We celebrate the new car, then lock ourselves into 5 years of monthly payments that completely block investing. What we never celebrate is the invisible millionaire, the person driving a 12-year-old sedan, living in the modest house, wearing the same clothes from 4 years ago. These people are not depriving themselves. They figured out that there is a massive difference between being rich and looking rich. And looking rich is expensive. Being actually rich requires looking completely average for decades. I spend a lot of time reading SEC filings and earnings reports. It is boring work. But buried inside those documents are patterns that show up over and over. The ultra-wealthy, the people with real generational wealth, they do not drive Lamborghinis. They drive 10-year-old Lexuses. They do not live in mansions. They live in normal houses they bought years ago and never upgraded. They are not being cheap. They are simply playing a completely different game than everyone else. They are playing the compounding game, not the status game. And the gap between Sarah and Jess proves exactly why that matters. Meet Sarah, 32 years old, makes $75,000 a year as a project manager. She starts putting $500 a month into an index fund. Her friend Jess is the same age, earns the same income, but invests nothing. Instead, Jess upgrades her lifestyle every single time she gets a raise. By age 40, Sarah has about $70,000 invested. Jess has 0. But Jess drives a nicer car and lives in a better apartment. They both feel like they are doing fine. By age 50, Sarah has $350,000. Jess still has 0, but her social media looks incredible. By age 60, Sarah has $800,000. Her contributions are now being completely dwarfed by market returns. She could semi-retire right now if she wanted to. Jess is starting to panic. She has maybe $60,000 in a retirement account, and the end of her working years is suddenly visible on the horizon. Here is the brutal punchline. Both women made the exact same income their entire careers. The only difference was that Sarah automated $500 a month before she could ever spend it. Jess spent first and tried to save whatever was left over, which was always nothing. Same income, radically different lives. The gap between them was not knowledge. Jess knew she should have been investing the whole time. The gap was behavior. Sarah built a system that did not rely on willpower at all. Jess relied on monthly discipline, which is a resource that runs out. 40% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency, according to Federal Reserve data. If that is you, start with $50 a month or even $25. The exact amount matters far less than the habit and the automation. Because the person who builds the habit at $50 a month is far more likely to scale up later than the person who keeps waiting until the number feels comfortable.